Good morning, my friends. Welcome to Kevin at 7. Thank you for joining me for the special episode of Kevin at 7. It is Wednesday morning. It is Wednesday. Winsday. hashtag Wednesday. So hope you are planning to have a lot of wins and victories today, because that's what we're going to talk about today. In fact, we're going to talk about not only winning, we're going to also talk about losing. Because the secret to most winning is overcoming losing. The most successes come out of overcoming failure. And when you don't get that, then you let failure stop you because you think that means you're going the wrong direction or you're doing things wrong. And so it's not going to happen. And so we give up and we create that limit in our own mind and everything blows up. Failures are the seeds of success, right? That's the secret. That's what we're going to talk about today. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jennifer from Kendallville, Indiana. Good morning, Gina from Grapevine, Texas. Hey, Bonnie from Port Charlotte. Dino from San Francisco. Good to see all you guys this morning. As you come on, make sure you post where you're coming from in the world today. And here's the deal. Hey, Mike from Detroit. Good morning, Tammy from Omaha. Good to see you guys. Welcome, welcome. My life has been a beautiful, a symphony of failure. I mean, I just look around in my life and I'm like, I have failed so many times that it just is kind of mind-boggling. And guess what? I'm still failing, man. I still fail. It happens regularly. Hey, Terry from Scottsdale, Indiana. Dean from Eureka, California. Hey, Francisco from Indio. Max from Champaign, Illinois. As you come on, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and tell us where you are in the world. Just post it. Join us here. So some of you've heard my story. You know, when I started my coaching company, when I started my real estate coaching company, I failed like really, really fast. And this was back in 2011 or 2012 when I actually started it. And within 3 months, I had run out of money. I didn't have any savings. I didn't have anything to do. And so I ended up losing everything, except my car and my clothes and my air mattress. And I rented a bedroom in an old rundown apartment complex in Los Angeles. And slept on an air mattress for 8 months. And hoped and prayed that nobody would find out, hoped and prayed that nobody would know what was going on, because it was so bad. And there were so many times I wanted to just quit, because it just like, I would try stuff and it didn't work, and I try stuff and it didn't work. And most of the times in my life previously, whenever I tried something that failed, I went the safe route and I did something else. And this time I was like, this is my passion. This is my dream. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to give up my dream. I'd given up my dream so many times before. And it was through all the failures that I believed that ultimately that my success came. And so I want to talk today about how to create wins out of defeat. And I'm going to give you a little context. I'm reading this book again called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. This book was written 80 years ago. He wrote this book 80 years ago, and it was not published for 72 years. Because Napoleon Hill's wife and then his family was afraid of the repercussions if they published it, because it was so controversial. The content of it was so controversial, but the first part of it is not controversial at all. But it's crazy. There's something I wanted to read here. I got to find it now. I was reading it this morning and I thought, this is profound. Listen to this. This is what, you guys know Napoleon Hill, right? What was the book Napoleon Hill wrote? Who knows the book, the most famous book that Napoleon Hill wrote? What is his most famous book? Good morning, Sharon from Vancouver, British Columbia. Good to see you this morning. Welcome, welcome. Mike Easton, failure isn't failure. It's a learning experience. That is true if you actually learn from it. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, right? Instead of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And if we can get that when we lose, when we get defeated, we do something about it. All right, Think and Grow Rich, exactly. So this was Napoleon Hill's most famous work is Think and Grow Rich, right? That's the #1 self-help book, a bestseller of all time. And so it's like Zena Banks says, OMG, best book. It's still changing my life. I immediately quit smoking cigarettes and my relationship is better. Absolutely. And now Zena Banks, are you talking about Think and Grow Rich, or are you talking about this book? Two times tied right. Good morning. Oh, thanks, Amanda. All right. So here, when he wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, what he was doing is he was, based on Andrew Carnegie's directions, he was interviewing people to find out the law of a philosophy of achievement. Why makes people succeed and what makes people fail. But here's what's interesting. For him to create a philosophy of achievement, how do you succeed in life? Here is what I didn't remember until I was reading it again this morning. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And I kind of skipped through it because I've read the book before. So I was kind of skipping through it. So I was reading here, Begin Anew. It's the very beginning of the book, Outwitting the Devil. And after talking to Mr. Carnegie and deciding to do this, Mr. Carnegie said, you need to interview. Now, here's what he said. Here we go. He said, if you undertake this job, and this is Andrew Carnegie talking to Napoleon Hill. He said, if you undertake this job, you should interview not only the few who have succeeded, but the many who have failed. You should carefully analyze many thousands of people who have been classed as failures. And I mean by the term failures, men and women who come to the closing chapter of life disappointed because they did not attain the goal which they had set their hearts upon achieving. And so Andrew Carnegie said, if you want to learn about the philosophy of achievement, if you want to learn the secret to success, don't just interview people that have been successful, interview people that have been failures. And he says, you're going to actually find that you will learn a lot about success by talking to people who didn't succeed. Because he said, because they will teach you what not to do. He said, as inconsistent as it may seem, you will learn more about how to succeed from the failures than you will learn from the so-called successes. If that makes sense to you guys, let me see some thumbs up. This is like so powerful. He says, as inconsistent as it may seem, you will learn more about how to succeed from the failures than you will from the so-called successes, because they will teach you what not to do. See, we think failure is something to be avoided, but failure is something to be embraced. You want more wins in your life, you got to be willing to put yourself out there and have the successes. So during my labor, this is now Napoleon Hill talking, he says, during my labor of research into the causes of failure and success, I have had the privilege of analyzing more than 25,000 men and women who were rated failures, and over 500 who were classed as successful. Now, just think about that for a second. He says, I interviewed 500 successful business people, 500 people that were like massively successful. Everybody was like, I want to be like them. But he says what the real secret was, I interviewed 25,000 people that didn't get their dreams. They didn't win. And he says, and based on what Andrew Carnegie taught him, is they're the ones that taught him what not to do. Now, here is to me one of the most striking things. And when you read this book, my mind is always blown when I go back and read a book again at how much I didn't get the first time I read it. But then he starts talking about his own personal journey after meeting Andrew Carnegie, after accepting the commission of creating the philosophy of achievement, after interviewing all these successful people, after doing all this and discovering the 17 laws of success and the 30 causes of failure. He's identified all this stuff in all his research. And years later, okay, over a decade later, he is going through his life saying, I know all the stuff. I knew the causes of success and failure. but I hadn't figured out how to apply it in my own life. And he just starts bouncing around, trying to figure out what he wants to do in his life. And his life is just like, he's just basically miserable. He said, I started a company and I'm miserable. I got this job and I hate it. I did this and I didn't like it and I quit. And I went to this and I quit that. And then I ran out of options. And he says, I found myself well, here's what happened. He quit. He gave up a business opportunity that he was making a lot of money at. And everybody said told him he was crazy. He said they thought I was crazy and they were not backward about saying so. Frankly, I was inclined to agree with them, but there seemed nothing I could do about it. I basically said I wasn't happy. And he says, I was seeking happiness and I had not found it. At least that is the only explanation I could offer my unusual actions. And he says, what man really knows himself? He's like, I couldn't figure out why I was not happy. Here's a guy who knows how to succeed. He's been successful and he's still not happy. And so he talks about the struggle that he went on in this journey. And it was like he was now in the pits. And he says, I suffered for nearly 2 months with the worst of all human ailments, indecision. And he just talks about how that he went from learning all this, having success, and he goes into this period of failure where he's going and he has successes and then he just doesn't, but it doesn't mean anything to him. And he says, I figured out money's never going to make me happy. And what does he do? He keeps going. He keeps going. He keeps going. So here's the deal. And then here's the last thing about this is he said, I figured out that your only limitation is the one which you set up in your own mind. Your only limitation is the one which you set up in your own mind. That is profound. It's just, are you guys still with me? I'm just talking. I'm not interacting with you guys. I'm just sharing with you straight from my heart stuff that's impacting me. So if you guys are with me on this, tell me so. Yes? Thank you. The power of understanding, one, give yourself some grace. Okay. So if you're going through a period where you're like trying to figure it out, so did he. The guy that wrote Think and Grow Rich, the guy who we look back on and is like, this is the guy who introduced the law of success to us. And he still struggled. He kept learning and he didn't quit. He kept the journey going. And he says the worst part is indecision and realizing that the limits that you place on yourself are the only limits, the only thing that limits you. So there's so much more that I want to just share with you guys because I don't want to leave you hanging. But here's the last thing, and this is where I want to send you guys today in terms of winning, is that in the book they talk about, and he talks about this also in Think and Grow Rich as well, that most people quit when they run into failure or what he calls temporary defeat. And he says you have to understand that almost all of your failures, almost all of your defeats are only temporary parts of the journey. We take them as fatal, and he says they're not fatal. They're not final. They're just another step in the journey. He says what people don't realize is that temporary defeat is usually the very last step before a major breakthrough and a major success. It's right there. It's right in our hands, and we give it up because it got hard. We gave it up because we got pain, and we're like, no, okay, I give up. And we never know how close we were to actually hitting it out of the park, how close we were to the success, because we created the limit in our own mind that says, I can't do it. It's too hard. It's not going to happen. Or we attribute it to the economy or to our bank account, or we attribute it to something other than the fact that we're just quitting too soon. Failure is the pathway to success. And the only limits to your success are the ones you impose on yourself. And it's a journey, my friends. I wish there was a shortcut to this journey. Okay? I wish there was a shortcut to this journey. There are no shortcuts to success. And for some people, they have these things that happen and you're like, whoa, why couldn't that happen to me? Like these startups, these guys that start up these social media, these apps, they create these apps and then You know, 3 years later, they sell it to Facebook, or they sell it to Google for billions of dollars. And you're like, why? How did they become a billionaire in 3 years or whatever, multimillionaire? You know, it's just not fair. Well, my friends, I promise you, they have their own journeys, and their journeys is not over. And sometimes the worst thing that can happen to somebody is when they have really massive, fast success and then they're done with it. What do you do next? How do you top that? And that becomes their challenge. That becomes their journey. So wherever you are, whatever your challenges, whatever setbacks, whatever the struggles, whatever it is, it's your journey. But you can't go like, well, why can't I have what? Because that becomes the limit. Because the limitation is they have something I don't have. And so you're putting that limitation on you of they had luck or they had this or whatever. And that becomes your box that you put yourself in, and it limits your success. You got to figure out what you want, and you got to go for it. And you got to realize that when I hit failure is when you think. Failure is when you learn. Failure is when you pay attention. And it is then you learn what not to do. And you go like, okay, I'm going to course correct and I'm going to keep going. And most of your journey of success is course correction. That's what it is. It's course correction. I mean, how many times in football, whenever they hand the running back the football, does he run a straight line? No, he's having to juke and jive, and he's having to because he's got to avoid getting tackled, right? And you got to know that's going to happen. And then he does get tackled. And what do? They go back, get in the huddle, and then come back and run another play. Don't go like, oh, I got beat. I quit. Get back up. Keep going. That's the name of the game. It's the way it goes. And the beauty of it is it's your game. It is your game, and you're the playmaker. You're the playmaker, and you're the rule maker. You just set the rules for your own game. You know, like, well, 3 strikes and you're out. Well, that's baseball. 4 downs and you lose possession of the ball in football. Well, that's their rules, right? It's your game. You got to set the rules for how many strikes. Fail, another opportunity. That's it. That's the magic. All right, guys, go out there and win today. I want to hear about your wins. And I love defeats, man. When we have our coaching, when I have my coaching calls, my coaching members, we share not only wins, but we share defeats. Because if we go like, okay, well, let's hack that. Let's hack that defeat. What can we learn from it? That's what happens. All right, guys. So get it. Don't limit yourself, and don't let failure stop you. Go out there and win today. Play to win. Play to win. Never quit. And always expect yes. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Kevin at 7. Thanks again for joining me. Have an awesome day. Hearts to all you guys. Thumbs up to all of you for your massive wins today. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.